What's up everyone, it's Matt Mrozik, aka MVM397 with Stella Work in Progress Part 2. If you follow me on Facebook, you've kind of seen what I've done so far to the kit. The first work in progress showing you basically the kit itself and how I mark things up to find discrepancies in the resin. I did that step, and then I went and I followed up with a couple good coats of the Krylon Max primer. This stuff right here. This works really good. It goes on much smoother than the regular Krylon primer that I use, so it's less dusty. So once I sprayed it with that, oh, let me back up. So after I went through and I marked everything, I went ahead and pinned the legs, and I showed that to you on Facebook in a couple pictures. But so these two, the bottom parts of the legs were pinned and used and glued on with 1/16 brass rod and some medium CA and some zip kicker. And then I went through and I filled in all those seams with Tamiya light curing putty. And surprisingly, my putty work was really good. I think I only found one little pinhole that I needed to fix after that. And then after I pinned them, I went ahead and I did the Krylon Max primer like this, and that showed my little error with the putty. So after the primer, I wet sanded it all with some 3M superfine sanding sponges. These guys right here. And I did this wet, so I wet sanded with a 3M superfine sponge and some 600 grit wet dry sandpaper. And when I did that, I did it with some Dawn dish soap also in the water. And what the dish soap does is it lubricates your sandpaper. It makes it more effective. It doesn't get clogged as easily. So it cleans the sandpaper as you sand, and your sandpaper will last much longer. And it does another thing. Actually, it does a really good job of cleaning the piece that you're working on from any contaminants. So if you have anything on your hands, you know, if you have oily skin, it'll take care of that as you sand. So it kind of does two things for you. So after I did all that, sorry, my camera's shaking a little bit. It's attached to my table, sorry. So after I wet sanded everything, I went back and then I did some, if I can spit it out, I went back and I re-primed with Mr. Surfacer 1200, and I put on 3 very wet coats. I wanted to make sure I had really good coverage. I wanted to make sure I filled in all the sanding scratches from my previous sanding session. It went on super smooth, so it looked really good. A couple little things popped out after priming. Right here on the knee, you can see I've got some spot putty. I had a couple pinholes there. In the arm, there's a pretty good pin right here. Not a pin, bubble. So I initially fixed it with some light curing putty, and then after priming, it was still there. Now you're going to notice that these parts have some black spray paint on them. And you're like, why do you have black spray paint on it? Well, one thing that I'm going to use is that in the past I used to paint cars. And what we did after we primed the car, we would put down what's called a guide coat. And it's basically flat spray paint. So I just took some really cheap flat black spray paint and I just dusted all the parts. You can see here it's all speckly. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. So this is Mr. Surfacer 1200, 3 wet coats. It's cured for 24 hours. I have a couple layers of spot putty. This is the Bondo glazing putty, so it should adhere to the primer no problem. If you're going to use Tamiya light curing putty or something like that, you'd actually have to sand the primer off, open up the pinholes a little more, because the light curing putty will not stick to primer. So that's why I use the spot putty, and the holes are small. So now I'm going to show you is the guaranteed way to make sure you have all your sanding scratches out and a perfectly smooth surface. And that's where this black spray paint comes into play. So I've got a bucket of water here, and that's got a couple drops of Dawn soap in it. So again, I'm using not soap, sudsy water, but soap with a little bit of Dawn in it. I've got some 1000 grit sandpaper, and I've cut up into tiny squares so it's easier to work with. I find that the pieces are too big. First of all, I waste a lot of paper, and second, I can't get into nooks and crannies. So I cut it up into small squares. And one thing I used to do in the past when I did cars is I would actually soak the paper in the water, and that would it just kind of helps prepare the paper for sanding. So I'm going to throw a couple pieces in here and let it soak for a little bit. And you can leave it in there as long as you want. So if I went ahead and I just started sanding right away, the paper would be a little too abrasive. This again helps lubricate the paper, so I'm going to let it sit there for a few seconds just to kind of get it prepped for sanding. So I'm kind of using my knowledge from my previous life as a car restorer, car painter, and applying it to here. So if you haven't tried this before, I highly recommend it. So basically the goal is once all the black is gone, you know you have a perfectly smooth surface. And if there's any low areas or pinholes that you've missed, the black will stay there. So I'm going to do this on the rocket ship because it's the biggest piece and it's the easiest to sand. So I'm going to start off here and I'm going to show you what it kind of looks like. So as I sand, the black goes away. Let me wipe it off real quick. And here you can see what that's going to look like. So basically I just sand this entire piece. Again, this is wet sanding with a little bit of soap. And I keep dipping my paper in the water, making sure it's nice and clean. And here's a good example where the black, actually that's a little high spot. So that's actually going through down to the Krylon primer. So this will reveal any high spots, any low spots. I'm not really too worried about high spots. I'm worried about any pitting or anything like that. And since this is Mr. Surfacer, I'm using 1000 grit sandpaper because hopefully this will be my last priming stage. I'll have to do a little priming after I fix those pinholes, but it'll just be spot priming. I won't have to prime the whole piece. So we're going to sand, and don't worry if you go through. It's no biggie. You don't want to go down to the resin for sure, because if you go down to the resin, you'll have to spot prime that area. And you don't want to have to do that. You may go through to the resin on some high areas, some edges and stuff. If you do, just do a light mist coat of primer before you spray any paint, because even though the resin has like a really fine scratch in it, it is a porous material, and you'll notice a texture difference in your paint if you don't put some primer on it. So this piece is pretty smooth right here. I mean, I'm not getting any low spots. I'm sorry, I'm trying to keep my hands off the table so the camera doesn't shake. So we're going to see, I'm going to see if I can find a discrepancy to show you what this stuff does actually for you. It does no good if it's perfect right out of the gate. So I can just have a towel here on the side. I can wipe off and see my progress. And this is looking really good. There's one spot that I kind of noticed earlier on the top. I'm going to sand and see if it shows up to show you what this stuff does. The guide coat. Again, trying to keep this in frame here. I'm going to move my water back a little bit so I can make sure I'm in frame. So this is for you guys, for those of you who build models, sanding is like probably 70% of the process. Always sanding. And this 1000 grit sandpaper is the perfect final sanding stage for paint. So and I'm going through all of these steps because if I was doing a Gundam kit, I probably wouldn't go through this many steps. I'd probably just go down to the 600 grit sandpaper and be done with it, and I could paint out over that. But with the suit, the spacesuit, I'm going to go with a glossy surface and a pearl. So I need to make sure that it's as smooth as possible for the final finish. If I was doing a flat coat, it's not as imperative. One reason I have my paint jobs are as smooth as they are is because I go through several stages of priming and sanding. I mean, the prep work to get a good paint job, the prep work is so important. If you skip any steps or if you try to fudge on steps, it's going to show through all the way to the end. If you have orange peel in your primer layer, it's going to follow that paint job all the way through to your final top coat. You have to sand it out. So, and that's what another thing that this does is it shows you if you have any orange peel in your primer. So now I'm not going to fix it because it's covered up by her rear end. But you can see here whether there's black, that's a low spot. So if I was worried about seeing that, I'd fill it with some putty. But since she's sitting there, I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to fix that spot. So this is actually looking pretty good. As you can see, most of the black is going away. and I know I've got a smooth surface. So we're going to sand, see if we can get this piece sanded for the video. Alright. And you can kind of tell when your sandpaper is getting a little tired, it's not cutting as well. So you can either try to clean it off again in the water, or just put it in the water and get a new piece of paper and let it kind of soak there for a little bit and let it, all that stuff kind of dissolve off and clean the paper. So one tricky part is going to be getting into all these little grooves. You want to try to get that as much as possible. When I used to paint cars, you could always tell a good paint job by the finish of the edges. If the edges had orange peel and stuff like that, then you know that they didn't pay close attention to the paint job. So I always make special care to make sure I get the edges really good and they're smooth and all that stuff. This is actually coming out really good. I was hoping to find some discrepancies in this, but I'm not finding any yet. So I'll sand this piece up real quick, and then I'll get another piece. Maybe the piece, the arm that's got some putty on it, and we'll see how that looks. And I'm going down the soup. So right there, I went down to the resin. So I'll go back later and I'll just spot prime that. No big deal. I must not have had as much primer on that spot as I thought. So I'll just spot prime that, and then after I spot prime it, I won't do a total sand down. I'll just kind of go over that spot really, really lightly with some sandpaper to get any texture or orange peel out of it. So I mean, if I could, after I'm done with this, I could go over it with another coat of primer just so it's all the same tone. But I'm not going to, because the ship is going to get a metallic finish and it's going to get a base coat of gloss black, and that gloss black is going to cover this perfectly. So I don't need to worry about if the primers are all the same tone. If I was going with like a lighter color, like a white or a red, I would give it one more pass with the primer, make sure it's all the same color. So 1 second, my garage door is going to open, so it's going to get loud for a second. Go ahead, Owen, do it. Sorry about that, guys. What happens when you work in the garage and everyone needs to get to the garage and get interrupted? No big deal.
Your window's open.
I know. My son's telling me my window's open in my car. I've got it cracked. This has been 100 degrees here the past few days. Oh, here's a couple of areas that popped up. Oh, nope, they went away. Never mind. Like I said, the casting on this kit's really good. I mean, I had just hardly any areas to fix, so it's looking good. So now, this main part, this rocket ship is just about done. That went really quick. Hope I'm in frame. It's hard for me to tell if I'm in frame because I can't see through my camera when I'm recording videos. The webcam I bought was recommended to me by a bunch of friends, and it works great for chatting and video for streaming, but every time I try to record a video, it locks up after 10 seconds. So I don't know if I'm going to try to return it or what, but it works great for chatting. So I think I'll just hold on to it. So I'm going to get in here. And then this piece will just about be done. I know work in progress videos of sanding isn't very exciting, but I was trying to show you guys a technique that I've used in the past when I did cars. So I've never seen anyone mention this process. Okay, Owen, thank you. It's my son. Sorry, guys. And there goes the garage door. So I think this piece is just about done. Yeah, I think this piece is pretty good. Dip it in the water. And I'm just going to sand this. I'm going to sand in this area right here just a little bit more. So you'll see all that guide coat is gone. And now this is baby butt smooth. It is super slick. So this is a really surefire way to make sure that you've got the smoothest surface possible. You get to go one step further and sand it with 2000 grit sandpaper, but it's really not necessary. By the time you put all the paint on there and clear coat, it's going to look glass smooth. Okay, so I'm going to put that to the side because that looks good. And I'll bring out this other piece that's got a little, I know it's got a couple little issues on it. And then we'll wrap this video up because I know it's getting kind of long. Okay, so I've got some putty here. And I'm gonna see if I can sand it with the 1000. Actually, let's sand the rest of the arm first. And let's see if that guide coat reveals anything to us that we didn't see previously. So far so good. Now on these curved surfaces and edges, you will go down through this layer of primer into the previous layer pretty easily. And actually, since I used the Krylon primer before this and it's a darker tone, it's actually very beneficial because it tells me to stop sanding that area if possible. It's telling me I've gone too far. If it was the same color, it would be hard to see that I've gone through into the, and here I've gone through to the resin again. So I'm going to have to avoid that if I can. But if I go through resin, no problem, no more primer. Alright, let's see if I can sand this putty and see how it looks. So here you can kind of see a couple little pits in the primer. Right there, in the guide coat. Let's see if that's showing up. I don't know. A couple little specks of black. That lets me know I got to keep sanding that area. And then if you keep sanding and you go through down to the primer or to the resin and they're still there, then you have some putty work to do. But if you can sand it out with just the primer, that's even better. So I've gone down to the resin again. And on the putty, you can see I've got a little black line around it right there. So that's telling me I got to keep going. So I'm going to keep sanding this area until that putty's smooth, and then I'll just reprime it. Not the end of the world. I probably will hit this whole kit one more time with primer, just to make sure it's nice and slick. Okay, so that's all filled in there nicely. So one thing about building models is you go through stages of pretty and ugly. So it was really pretty yesterday after I sprayed the primer, and then it got really ugly when I put the guide coat on, and now it's getting even uglier with the sanding. So it's all the necessary steps to ensure a smooth paint job. So alright, so I'm going through the resin there a little bit. So this arm's got a little work to it. And we're going to sand the trim on it. Make sure it's nice and smooth. So anyway, I think you guys have the idea what the purpose of this black spray paint is for. You see I've gone through to the resin here and to the other laser primer. Again, no big deal because I'll go ahead and prime this kit one more time fully, and I'll use the Mr. Surfacer again, 1200. And I won't have to hose it on like I did last night. I won't do like 3 wet coats. I'll probably do one nice slick coat, and then I'll hit it one. I won't wet sand it. What I'll do is I'll just go over it really lightly with the 3M microfine sanding sponge, and that's like 2000 grit sandpaper, and I'll just lightly hit it to get any maybe dusty overspray off or anything, because I want it as smooth as possible before I start laying paint on this sucker. Because again, this isn't like a weathered Gundam or a flat coat Gundam. The suit's going to be glossy. The ship's going to be a metallic finish. It won't be glossy, but I need a nice smooth start to get it to look right. So I'm going to stop my video here because it's going on, and I know it's boring to watch people sand, trust me. Oh, there's a good example right there in the arm. See, let me wipe it off. Some discrepancies right there. So we're just going to sand those out until that black is gone. And then we know it's smooth. And see, they're gone. So it's smooth. So anyway, that's 20 minutes of me rambling on and sanding. Hope that was helpful for you guys. I'm going to get this sanded down tonight and hopefully get another layer of primer on it. And then I hope I'm ready for paint for the weekend. So as always, thanks for watching. It's Matt Morozic, aka MVM3897, signing off. Catch you guys later.